The US military never planned to attack its own citizens. Except it absolutely did. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff drafted detailed plans for domestic terrorism. Real attacks. Real American casualties. All to justify invading Cuba. The document is called Operation Northwoods. It wasn't a rogue proposal from low-level officers. It came from the highest military authority in America, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Lyman Lemnitzer himself. Signed. Presented to the Secretary of Defense. Waiting only for presidential approval. The plan remained classified for 35 years. When the National Security Archive finally pried it loose in 1997, historians couldn't believe what they were reading. The proposals weren't vague suggestions. They were operational blueprints with timelines, target lists, and casualty projections. To understand why this plan exists, you need to know about the Bay of Pigs disaster. April 1961. CIA-trained Cuban exiles invaded Cuba to overthrow Fidel Castro. The invasion collapsed in 3 days. Kennedy refused to provide air support. The military blamed him for the failure. The Joint Chiefs wanted another shot at Castro. But Kennedy had no appetite for direct military confrontation. The American public wouldn't support an unprovoked invasion. So the military needed a provocation. A really good one. Something that would make war seem not just justified, but necessary. The Northwoods memo opens with this objective: to provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. What follows is 13 pages of proposed false flag operations. Each one designed to convince Americans that Cuba posed an immediate, violent threat to national security. Proposal 1: stage mock attacks on Guantanamo Bay. Start fires. Blow up ammunition dumps. Shoot at the base from outside the fence. Blame Cuban saboteurs. The memo notes this would be easy since the U.S. controlled the entire perimeter. Proposal 2: create a remember the main incident. Sink a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Harbor. Conduct funerals for mock victims. Publish casualty lists in newspapers. The memo actually references the 1898 explosion that triggered the Spanish-American War, suggesting they replicate that exact propaganda playbook. Proposal 3 gets darker. Develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. The plan specifies, we could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. Foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees. Explode plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots. The phrase real or simulated appears repeatedly. Sometimes they'd stage events. Sometimes they'd kill actual people. The memo discusses both options with identical bureaucratic tone. No moral distinction drawn between theater and murder. Proposal 4: hijack aircraft. The plan called for painting a civilian plane to look like a commercial airliner, filling it with passengers, then either landing it safely elsewhere while claiming Cuba shot it down, or actually crashing it and claiming Cuba shot it down. The documents discuss both scenarios. One hijacking variation is especially chilling: load an identical aircraft with CIA operatives using aliases matching a real passenger manifest. Meanwhile, the actual civilian plane with real passengers lands safely at a US base. The drone gets blown up over Cuba. The military holds funerals for people still alive in protective custody. Proposal 5: manufacture evidence. Plant Cuban weapons at attack sites. Produce fake radio transmissions between Cuban military units. Forge documents proving Castro ordered the attacks. The memo includes a section on controlling the narrative through coordinated media releases. Some proposals targeted international sympathy. Sink a boatload of Cuban refugees fleeing to Florida. Make sure journalists photograph bodies washing ashore. Stage riots in Havana where U.S. agents posing as revolutionaries get beaten by Castro's police, captured on camera. Another angle: make Castro look like a Soviet puppet. Shoot down a U.S. military drone over Cuban airspace, then produce fake Soviet radar parts recovered from the crash site. Imply Moscow gave Cuba advanced weapons systems. The Cold War context made this particularly inflammatory. The most elaborate proposal involved creating an incident that would justify intervention and give the appearance of Cuban recklessness. Launch a space mission from Cape Canaveral. If it fails, blame Cuban electronic interference. If it succeeds, claim Cuba tried to sabotage it anyway. Every proposal included detailed appendices, timelines for execution, lists of military units to be mobilized, draft press releases already written, talking points for Pentagon spokesmen. This wasn't brainstorming. This was operational planning. On March 13, 1962, Lemnitzer presented Northwoods to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs advocated for immediate implementation. He wanted approval within weeks. Spring 1962 seemed like the perfect window for invasion. McNamara rejected it immediately. He found the proposals reckless and morally unconscionable. But he didn't destroy the document. He forwarded it to President Kennedy with a note recommending non-approval. Kennedy agreed. Operation Northwoods was shelved. 3 weeks later, Kennedy removed Lemnitzer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Officially, it was a routine rotation. He was reassigned to NATO command in Europe. Northwoods was never mentioned publicly. The general kept his rank and pension. No scandal. No investigation. The document sat in classified archives for 35 years. Researchers trying to understand Kennedy-era Cuba policy kept hitting redactions. The government claimed release would damage national security. What kind of national security risk could possibly last 3 decades? In 1997, the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board forced declassification as part of broader JFK document releases. When researchers finally saw the unredacted Northwoods files, it recontextualized everything. This wasn't conspiracy theory. This was documented conspiracy fact. Journalist James Bamford broke the story in his 2001 book Body of Secrets. Major newspapers covered it, but public reaction was surprisingly muted. Maybe because Americans had already lived through Watergate, Iran-Contra, and Gulf of Tonkin revelations. Trust was already broken. The legal justification in the Northwoods memo is particularly disturbing. It cites the Cuban threat to peace in the Western Hemisphere. It references the Monroe Doctrine. It frames domestic terrorism as patriotic duty, acceptable casualties in service of hemispheric security. Some historians argue Northwoods was never seriously considered, just military officers exploring all options. But the memo's language contradicts that. It uses phrases like "we could accomplish this objective and should be scheduled." These are action verbs. Implementation language. What stopped it? Kennedy's personal refusal. One man's decision. If a more hawkish president sat in that office, Northwoods might have proceeded. Americans might have died in false flag attacks. The invasion might have happened. Soviet retaliation might have followed. 7 months after rejecting Northwoods, Kennedy faced the Cuban Missile Crisis. Soviet nuclear missiles 90 miles from Florida. The Joint Chiefs pushed for immediate invasion. Kennedy chose blockade instead. The military thought he was weak. History suggests he prevented nuclear war. 13 months after the missile crisis, Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Conspiracy theories immediately flourished. Could the military have been involved? There's no evidence connecting Northwoods to the assassination. But the document proves high-ranking officers were capable of proposing the unthinkable. Operation Northwoods remains the only definitively proven false flag proposal in modern American history. Declassified. Authenticated. Undeniable. It's taught in some political science courses now, though rarely mentioned in standard U.S. history curricula. Too uncomfortable. The scariest part isn't that someone proposed it. It's how far it got. Written. Approved by the Joint Chiefs. Presented to civilian leadership. One signature away from becoming operational reality. The system almost failed. Almost. How many other proposals like Northwoods exist in still classified files? How many were rejected? How many were approved? We know about this one only because decades passed and someone fought for release. The really sensitive operations probably stay buried forever. The Northwoods documents are publicly available now. Anyone can read them on the National Security Archive website. 13 pages of military officials casually discussing killing American civilians to start a war. It's worth reading yourself. Some things you need to see firsthand. This is why declassification matters. Why transparency matters. Why checks on military power matter. Operation Northwoods is a case study in what happens when institutions decide the ends justify any means. And what happens when one person says no. If this kind of verified, documented history interests you, subscribe. There are more declassified operations, more buried truths, more stories they didn't teach in school. Real events. Real documents. No speculation required. The truth is disturbing enough.